My name is Gábor Kovács, and I'm Hungary's commercial counselor to the Republic of Korea. On my side is my dear friend and colleague, Ms. Dorottya Martonfi, who also serves as a commercial diplomat in Washington, D.C. Together, we are delighted to serve as your masters of ceremony during this two-day conference. The theme of our conference this year is Trade, a Force for Good. Include, innovate, integrate.
And now, we would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. János Áder, the President of Hungary, to officially open the forum and deliver his keynote address. Please join us in welcoming President Áder to the stage.
Tisztelt miniszter úr, tisztelt vezérigazgató asszony, tisztelt hölgyeim és uraim!
Ladies and gentlemen,
a teremben ülők közül bizonyára sokan ismerik a következő adatokat.
many know the following data among
A
you.
világkereskedelem forgalma
The turnover in global trade since 1950 has increased 32-fold. Its share of the global GDP has increased from 5.5% to 21%. In addition to this, according to a majority of the researchers, we are going to see a continuation of this trend in the next coming decades. So seemingly everything is in order, but can we be satisfied? During the past decades, the main driver of trade was the attainable profit. Raw material bases, production phases, and sales chains were linked in the global space. The model so far for economic development was extract it, process it, use it, and discard it. Success, you were successful if you were able to actually execute this process at the highest speed possible. And of course, global trade also assisted in this. When it comes to the production and sales chain, we did not calculate, we did not take into account all the natural resources that we were using free of charge. We had no regard to air pollution, water pollution, the demise of the biodiversity, and of course the ever-increasing role of factors, adverse factors on the human health. By today, we are in a situation where we're using resources during 1 year on planet Earth that could only be reproduced by a planet 1.5 times the size of our planet. So translated to business language, we are not actually appropriating the interest on our capital, the yield on our capital. We are actually consuming our capital. We are amassing debt continuously, and somebody will have to honor this debt. And it only takes common sense to understand that this is a path that is not viable. Let me quote for you Albert Einstein, who said, and he said this long before this problem was ever discussed or mentioned. He said the following: "We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." The question is, how can we make our development sustainable? How is it possible, and how should we transform not only our industrial activity but also our trade? To actually illustrate the magnitude of this problem and the task, I'd like to just offer for you two issues. One has to do with transportation. 80% of commercial trade today is done by ships, in shipping, although this is the cheapest form of transportation, it has a huge footprint. And what is the problem? The problem is that maritime shipping actually stands for 3% of the world's CO2 emission. This is actually more than the annual emission of Germany, 15 times the emission of Hungary, and a third comparison, this amount of emission actually equals to the annual emission of 230 high-performance coal-fueled power plants annually. And if we look at the forecasts, they are even more alarming. By 2050, the footprint of shipping will actually increase to 17%. This today is actually more than the aggregate emission of all the member states of the European Union in a year. And this is not only the problem of the emitted CO2, because shipping is also responsible for sulfur dioxide 13% and also nitrogen oxide 15%. So what is quite clear is that it is inevitable that we have to make the fuel consumption of shipping much more efficient and also to decrease emission. This is not going to be music to the ears of those in the maritime shipping industry, but I propose that the Paris Agreement has to be extended to shipping, maritime shipping. My second topic is to do with packaging. It's definitely worth thinking. If we look at commerce, so the quantity of packaging, which actually bears only advertisement purposes, is actually sometimes almost the weight of the product actually packaged into it. So the industry, both the industry and commerce, are using a huge amount of plastic. Nowadays, a garbage van full of garbage is actually dumped into the seas by every minute. We have whole islands of garbage the size of Argentina floating. If we go like this, by 2050 there will be more plastic waste in the seas than fish. We use a plastic bag for about 20 to 30 minutes, while it takes 200 years for nature to actually decompose this. Not to mention the fact that this finite, minuscule plastic micro impurities actually find their way into our food chain. So we are in the end actually poisoning ourselves. This is why it's time for us to come to our senses. It's time to act. It is high time that we start migrating to more efficient, biodegradable packaging. And then we have not mentioned the selective collection, the reprocessing of packaging materials, the possibility of using them as industrial raw material. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, the last two topics of your conference is going to be green means business, and the second topic is going to be titled From Waste to Wealth. These are indeed very actual issues, and I honestly hope that this is going to be a debate that is going to help us act. I would like to wish you all a very successful conference by mentioning Einstein again. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. President, thank you for your inspirational words. And now, let me invite His Excellency, Mr. Péter Szijjártó, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary, to deliver his welcome speech.
A very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to express our gratefulness to the President of Hungary, Mr. János Áder, to be kind enough to come and open the World Export Development Forum, which holds its first conference ever in history in a Central European country, which is a clear proof that Central Europe is on its best way to become the growth engine of Europe and the European Union. When we started this year from a foreign policy and foreign affairs point of view, it seemed not to be an exaggeration to say that this year would be a record year when it comes to diplomacy. And we have been holding the rotating presidency of the Visegrad cooperation, which is a Central European alliance historically deeply rooted among 4 countries, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary. This year we are holding the rotating presidency of the Danube regional strategy. Within a month we're gonna host the 16+1 summit, which is a cooperation between China and the Central and Eastern European countries. And now, as a first Central European country, we have the chance to host the World Economic Development Forum, for which we are grateful. We welcome the representatives, the Minister of National Development and International Trade of Sri Lanka, the representative of the former event, last year's conference, and we welcome the representatives of Zambia, who will take the responsibility to host this forum next year. You came to a country which made a big experiment in the last 3 years, how to combine trade and foreign affairs in the meantime. You who have come here, you have to be aware of the fact that you have come to a small country with a very open economy, where the export over GDP ratio is around 90%, where the FDI stock per capita reached 8,600 euros. So you can see that we are pretty much dependent on the external factor of economy when it comes to the performance of the national economic system. And here we made an experiment saying that since we are a small country, no one expects from us to offer general solutions for global crisis. To be more honest, no one cares what we say about global crisis. So then why not to use foreign affairs to serve the economic interest of the country? So we merged external economic relations with foreign affairs. The name of the ministry which is responsible for that is Ministry of External Economic Relations and Foreign Affairs, and sequencing counts, you can be sure. So here the foreign policy infrastructure, the foreign policy structure, diplomacy, is there to serve the national economic interest, is there to realize and verify the national economic interest. Here the performance and achievement of diplomacy and the diplomats themselves is not based on the numbers of receptions ambassadors take part, is based on whether they are able to explore new export opportunities for Hungarian companies, especially the small and medium ones, and whether they are able to attract additional investments, foreign direct investments in the country. Because we all understand, I'm pretty sure that all of you understand who are here in this room, that we have a tough international competition when it comes to export and when it comes to investments. And in this tough competition, you can and we can only be among the winners if we have good arguments. And in this case, we need economic arguments. Hungary has entered this tough race with introducing the lowest corporate income tax rate of Europe and with the lowest personal income tax rate of Europe, offering a wide variety of incentives for investors who would like to come here, and offering a wide variety of subsidies and preferential credits and loans for companies who would like to sell their products and services outside of the country. Dear colleagues, Hungary used to be part of the problem here in Europe. we had terrible economic figures 7 years ago. We were under an IMF program. But with a brave and unconventional type of economic policy, which built a lot on the ability of the country to attract investments and to increase exports, today we are part of the solution. And with our model, we have even been able to overcome a dogma which said that you have to pick whether you go with fiscal discipline or you boost economic growth. And we put this dogma into parentheses, and we proved that it's possible to boost economic growth and to remain disciplined fiscally in the meantime. And I think it's key for all those countries who would like to reform themselves, who would like to restructure their economy, and who would like to play a more important and more significant role in global trade and global economy than currently. In 2010, as we entered office, we have put a target, a goal, that we would like to be the manufacturing hub of Europe. And now, as being successful to this end, we have to pose another question, and I'm pretty sure that all of you who are in the hall and representing countries, you have to put the same question: how to fulfill the requirements of the new industrial era, how to fulfill the requirements of the fourth industrial revolution, and how to overcome the challenges of digitalization. Because when it comes to the challenges of those countries who would like to export more, first of all, currently, we have to overcome the challenges of digitalization. Without that, with only building on the traditional manufacturing, we will not be able to successful on international trade and on global economics either. In Hungary, we have made very significant decisions in order to be competitive in the digital age as well. By the end of next year, we will have broadband internet all around the country. By the end of 2020, we will have 100 megabit per second internet access all around the country. And we are putting enormous efforts in becoming the front runners of using 5G technology. Of course, we have to do that since the Hungarian economy is mainly based on the automotive sector, and the automotive sector is developing very rapidly to this end. It's not about manufacturing anymore, it's about autonomous driving, it's about electromobility. And as the World Economic Development Forum and as ITC has it in the forefront, the Hungarian government has the same strategy when it comes to supporting small and medium enterprises. Our goal is to radically increase the role and the weight of small and medium enterprises in our export activities. We can do it in two ways, either directly or indirectly. Directly helping small and medium enterprises to be competitive on external markets. The further the respective market is, the more complicated this task is. But on the other hand, indirectly helping our small and medium enterprises to become parts of the supplier chains of the big multinational companies investing in Hungary or around. And since we are a small country, we have to be very focused. That's why we have to be aware of the fact which industries can be competitive in this regard. Water management, agriculture, agrarian technologies, food industry, and pharmaceutical industry are those fields of economy where Hungarian products and services can be of the benefit of the development of the countries you represent. That's why the B2B meetings and the exhibitions which are held on the margins of this forum will highlight these territories where the Hungarian knowledge, diligence and creativity will be highlighted. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, Hungary is deeply integrated into the European Union. 78% of our trade is happening with the European Union. 27% of our trade is happening with Germany, which is the backbone, which gives the backbone and the basis of the European economy. You might hear a lot about the German-French cooperation, but I'm telling you that the trade between the 4 Central European countries I mentioned to you and Germany is 55% higher than the trade between Germany and France. So you can see how deeply integrated Hungarian economy and the Central European economies are in the European economy. That's why for us the success and the increasing competitiveness of European Union is vital. That's why we push for acceleration of free trade agreements. Hungary has been and will remain a strong promoter of free trade. The less obstacles are there in the way of international trade is the better for Hungary. We are frustrated of the fact that the last time European Union was able to fully implement the free trade agreement was in 2011. 6 years ago, with the Republic of Korea. And currently, when things are happening not in 6 years, but from one moment to the other, then this is extremely slow. And that puts a big question mark when it comes to the issue of whether we can increase or enhance competitiveness in the future on a European level or not. So we are pushing the European Union to accelerate, to speed up negotiations about free trade, to implement those agreements which have been concluded, because without those, we're not going to be able to gain back at least part of the lost competitiveness of European Union. And we are pretty much aware of the fact that strong Hungary comes in line with a strong European Union. So here, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, you will have the opportunity for 2 days, basically with yesterday free altogether, to come to know the best practices of each other, to come to know the opportunities we offer to each other. And I wish that this conference, first time in Central Europe, will contribute to the success of those countries which you represent when it comes to international trade and when it comes to increasing your share in global exports. I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for coming to Budapest, to Hungary.
Minister Szijjártó, thank you for your informative and enlightening speech. And now, for our third and final keynote address, I ask Madam Arancha González, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, to deliver her opening remarks.
Excellency János, Áder, President of Hungary, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. But more importantly, thank you very much for being a true champion for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The goals that we have all undertaken to respect, to end extreme poverty by 2030. Jó napot kívánok! Which in my poor Hungarian seems to mean good morning to you all. On behalf of the International Trade Center, I want to thank Hungarian government, and in particular Minister Péter Szijjártó, for partnering with us to host the 17th edition of the World Export Development Forum. We gather here in Budapest at a time of considerable popular skepticism about trade. Around the world, people are questioning the value of open markets, of trade agreements, of multilateral trade cooperation. And yet, the fact is that trade matters for prosperity. By making it possible for individuals and businesses to specialize and to scale up, trade leads to higher productivity. It frees up resources and intellectual energy for new pursuits, spurring innovation. For developing countries and economies in transition, open regional and global markets have allowed businesses to import ideas and capital and export increasingly sophisticated goods and services. And this is the story of Hungary. This is exactly what has happened here in this country, but also more broadly in Central and Eastern Europe. Integration into European value chains has been a big part of the economic transformation of this region since 1989. Countries from Canada to China, from Chile to Kenya, have used open markets to drive growth and to reduce poverty, in turn creating opportunities elsewhere around the world. Today, the share of humans living in extreme poverty is lower than it has ever been in our human history. Open markets, anchored in the rules-based multilateral system, is part of this important story. Trade is not an end in itself, it's a tool, but it's an important tool for the productivity of business, for the competitiveness of national economies, and for the growth, the value addition, and the job creation that we all want for our economies. Giving up this tool by closing our markets would diminish growth and opportunities for future generations. So the real question to me is not trade, yes or no, is not whether to trade. It's pretty clear that we have to. The question is how to make trade work for the 99%. It is about how to make trade work for more inclusive growth, for more and better environmental sustainability, as we have just heard from the President, and for shared prosperity. Because even though trade has enriched us, many have not shared in this progress. Large parts of society, large parts of business, many developing countries still remain on the margins of value chains, supplying unprocessed raw materials, if anything at all. Trade policies are not the only factor. We need good domestic, social, labor, education policies that often have fallen short. They have often failed to equip people with the skills, with the rights, with the safety nets that are needed to cope with the fast pace of technological change and global competition. But trade policy can help. What our new flagship research, the SME Competitiveness Outlook 2017, tells us is that trade and investment can be good for inclusive growth, provided we do this trade and investment agreements in a certain way. And the question is doing it in this right way. All of us are in this room today because we think that trade is a force for good, and because we believe we can make it work even better. Many of you work for micro, small, and medium enterprises, or for companies or institutions that do business with them. MSMEs are at the heart of making our economies more inclusive. Here in Hungary, MSMEs represent more than 99% of all businesses, 70% of all jobs, and 58% of value added. But they are underrepresented in trade. They account for only 28% of Hungary's exports to the EU. The pattern is just too common across the world. Because MSMEs account for the vast majority of businesses and job creation just about everywhere, the more they are able to be competitive, the more they can connect to the global economy, whether it is offline and now more and more online, the more they can help us translate trade into more inclusive growth. The most pressing issue ahead of us is to support MSMEs become more competitive, and this internationally. And this means simplifying paperwork and trade-related procedures for importers and exporters. And this means improving logistic services and making them more competitive. And this means easing access to working capital and trade finance for small-scale entrepreneurs. But it also means, and this is what MSMEs are telling us around the world, equipping them with tools to get better intelligence of what markets are demanding from them. And this is why the International Trade Center, together with the World Trade Organization and UNCTAD, will be on the occasion of the WTO Trade Ministerial in Buenos Aires at the end of the year, launching an online SME trade help desk, an online tool to support MSMEs gather the trade intelligence that they need to target export markets, to find not the information, the intelligence that they need to be active in foreign markets. It will signal that technology helps SMEs. It will signal that the WTO is also the home for small and medium enterprises. Talking about technology, technology is making also supply chain traceability and transparency more and more affordable. Multinational businesses can today invest in making it easier for MSMEs to be certified as compliant with value chain standards. They have a chance to respond to consumers who want more and more to know the sustainability story of the products they buy. They can help upgrade and broaden their supply network and grow their future potential customer base in developing countries. Finally, the single greatest thing we can do to improve countries' long-term potential for growth and inclusion is to achieve gender equality. Helping women-owned MSMEs trade yields outsized socio-economic dividends. This is why ITC's She Trades initiative works to empower women as economic actors of change. And this is why we will be urging governments in Buenos Aires at the WTO Ministerial Conference to sign on to a joint declaration on trade and gender, making sure that trade can help in embedding more women into international trade, but making sure also that trade is a tool for women to contribute to the growth, inclusive growth of our societies. Before closing, allow me a moment to remind you what the World Export Development Forum is about. It's about talking business, but also about doing business. On talking business, we have amazing stories that I urge you to pay attention to, because there is a lot to learn from people here in this room. You can listen to Chisa Makonnen, whose Ghana-based brand Aphrodisiac is making waves in the fashion world while empowering women she employs. You will be listening to Sandor Kurti, that 28 years ago co-founded a hard drive repair shop here in Budapest that has now grown into a multi-million-dollar security and data recovery
we would like to thank the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble for this truly amazing performance. And also, let me take this opportunity to thank President Áder for being here with us this morning. Please remain seated for the opening plenary titled Making Trade Work for the 99%, which will start in a few seconds. We wish you successful discussions over the next 2 days.
But before handing the stage over to the moderator of our first plenary session, I would like to announce some housekeeping items. Right after this plenary, we will have a short coffee break from 11:30. But before you head out, we will invite you to join us for a group photo here on the stage. So please make sure not to miss that. For those who haven't signed up yet for the company visits taking place on the 27th, you may do so all of today and during tomorrow at the information desk, which is to be found at the main entrance. We would also like to remind you that all sessions are being live streamed. And if you'd like to tweet about the event, please make sure to use hashtag WEDF17.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the welcoming remarks of our keynote speakers, you have heard why trade matters to all of us and that we need to ensure that the benefits of trade reach all of our